I'm here with Ari Herstand from LA in the US. He is a music business coach now. He's also a full-time musician, so he will be probably only the second full-time musician I've had on the show. He's a very knowledgeable guy. He's also an industry blogger now, and he's had a bit of success with YouTube. So he's also the first person I've had on the show who can speak directly to YouTube and maybe how that works. I know Ari as Mr. Practical. He's one of the most practical guys in the whole music marketing space, so that's why he's on the show today. I know the audience is going to love that. Ari, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe how you got started as a full-time musician? Because I know that process took a little bit of time, and I've heard other interviews where that's kind of been pushed along a bit, maybe it got glossed over. It would sound like it took a couple of years. So could you just tell us about that and then how maybe you moved into the industry side of things after that?
Sure, totally. Well, thank you for that introduction. You make me sound pretty awesome.
That's the plan.
So I'm going to play this introduction back to everyone I meet. It's like, hold on one second, just listen to Joshua for a second. So anyway, So I got started in Minneapolis. I started my music career in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is where Prince is from, and Atmosphere and the Replacements and a bunch of other fantastic musicians. I went to university in Minneapolis, and so that's what kind of brought me to that city. And I started my music career just basically by performing at coffee shops around the University of Minnesota campus with my RA, who was a beatboxer, and my roommate, who was a cellist, and a girl down the hall who was a singer. And this was like kind of the band. And we just, went around to various campus coffee shops and bars and dorms. And that's kind of really what started it all. And I realized very early on that no one was going to come to our shows if I didn't promote it. So from my very first, and that band, so to speak, was very short-lived. I've been virtually my entire music career has been a solo artist, solo musician under my name. But I started very early on promoting every show, even from my very first coffee shop show on campus. I went all out with promotion, and I, printed up hundreds of flyers and posters and put them up all over campus and kind of told everyone. And what I realized early on was that by just kind of making it an event and by printing up some posters and flyers, and this was before the era of Facebook, or really Facebook it wasn't what it is today. So I realized by kind of printing up posters, it legitimized the show, and it kind of turned it into an event, and people started talking about it. And even though my first coffee shop show, I got 30 some people there, and I printed up maybe 300 flyers and put them around campus, it was still something that I kind of had the bigger vision in mind. And so every show that I played, and I started playing a lot all over campus, I put up flyers and posters. And so after about a year and a half, 2 years of postering for every show that I had on just kind of like black and white 8.5 by 11 posters, I finally had a CD to release. And for my CD release show, I printed up bigger full color posters, 11 by 17, which I think legitimized this show a little bit more and kind of got people talking even more. And I kind of turned into the guy from the posters on the University of Minnesota campus, because my posters were everywhere and people kept seeing them. And so for the CD release, they're like, oh man, all right, I've seen this guy's name all over campus for the last 2 years. Now he's got a huge full color poster and he's releasing a CD. It's an event. I want to check out what this is. And so for my debut CD release show, it was held at a venue right near campus called the Varsity Theater in Minneapolis, and 250 people came out to that show. It was for my debut CD release, and I think I sold like 80 CDs that night, and it was great. And that kind of started it all. And I realized, wow, like I made a ton of money. I made $800 in CD sales that night, and 250 people times I think it was a $5 cover then. So, I made a hefty amount that night, and I realized like, wow, I can actually like make money doing this. I just have to figure out how to keep doing this. And, I realized I experimented a lot, and I after a while, I realized, I can't do those kinds of big shows every week or every month. And so I spread out my local shows about 6 weeks apart, 6 to 8 weeks apart. And I grew up in the state right next door to Minnesota, Wisconsin, for those listening in Australia who have no concept of U.S. geography. Actually, most people in the states on the coast in California have absolutely no concept of U.S. geography either. So when I tell them I'm from Minnesota and Wisconsin, I mean, it may as well be somewhere in Asia because they have no concept. But anyway, so I was from the state right next door. And so my earliest tours were basically kind of touring to the state, to Wisconsin, and playing my hometown where I went to high school there, and the city there. And I just kind of, all the cities that had a music scene, I used all my resources to, once I booked the show, to promote it. And I realized that, venues weren't going to do me any favors. They'll give me a night, but they're not going to bring a crowd. And so it's always been my philosophy, and I still hold this for every show I play, is if I don't promote it, no one's going to show up. And I think there's this huge disconnect with musicians, and I'm sure you can speak to this as a venue, as venue operator and booker for many years. There's a disconnect in that musicians feel that venues should promote the show, and venues feel that musicians need to bring the fans, and which results in a lot of empty rooms. So, what I always tell musicians is that, listen, a venue is putting on, the popular venues are putting on a show every single night of the week. And sometimes there are 3 to 4 bands on each of those shows. And, so that's a lot of bands that are playing their venue, and they can't promote every single show that they're putting on, because no one would take them seriously, and no one can come to every single one of their shows. So musicians, they're the ones responsible for promoting the show. And sure, venues can help them out and set up, advanced ticket links and put up the posters in their venue, and they'll possibly have a weekly ad in the newspaper or something like that, and they'll put your show on their website, but that's about it. And so what I realized early on was the most important thing for my live shows, and I built my career on the live show, was every city I went to, I figured out how I was going to bring enough people to fill the room. Not necessarily sell it out, but, book a size room that I could fill. And so once I kind of did a bit of the regional touring, and I embarked on kind of my first, more extensive tour, I teamed up with other bands in those cities. I had a street team. I used my network. I tried to reignite relationships that I've had. Friends, not I haven't had that many kinds of romantic relationships, but not like that reigniting, but reigniting just like high school friends or whomever that are maybe I had 4 friends from high school that live in Denver, Colorado. And so when I went to Denver, I hit up those 4 people and individually, and I messaged them and talked to them about, getting their ideas on how they could help me with the show, even if they just had a venue suggestion of a place they like to go, or, those 4 people, if they each brought 4 people, that's 16 people. That's a great for a first turnout in a new city. But I came up one tour, which I've talked about a few times in my Aris take posts, and I sometimes bands that I consult with, is one of my first major tours. I went to I think it was 10 to 15 cities I'd never been to before, and this was on my own and just touring solo, and I spent a week in each city. And it was I contacted the local high schools in the various cities, and I talked to the music teachers at these high schools, and I told them that I was going to spend a week in their city, and I'd love to come into the school and chat with the music students just about my career. I'm an independent full-time musician. I grew up in band and choir and orchestra. I play trumpet also, and kind of how a more or less formal music education helped to where I am, but also for the kids, it was cool for them because I'd play a couple songs of, the contemporary songs that I have now, and then I'd give a little chat. But the whole purpose of this trip was I then booked an all ages venue for that Saturday night, and I told all the venues what I was doing, and they gave me the night for my first time through the city. And every city I went to, at least 50 kids showed up for my very first time there, paying, I don't know, anywhere from $10 to $12 a head. And some cities I had 250 kids there. And I think, the smallest turnout was probably 50 and the biggest was 250 to 300 for my very first time in that city. And that was like a really great way to kind of get my foot in the door in that city. And then the venue, loved me because I filled the place, and these high school kids were super enthused, and they, bought t-shirts and I mean, high school kids, they have their parents' disposable income. So they bought a lot of merch. And so that tour was incredibly successful. And what I always tell people is just, when you go into various towns or you want to promote a show or a tour or anything like that, think of what makes your band unique. For me, I enjoy public speaking. A lot of musicians hate it, and this idea of this high school tour scares the shit out of them. And I get it. Like, no one can do. No two bands should have the exact same promotional plan or booking plan, because no two bands are the same. So this worked well for me. I do have a formal music education. I do enjoy getting up in front of large groups and speaking. So this is something that I used, but anyone can find anything. I know a guy who's a phenomenal metal guitar player. And so what he does is he, set up master classes in the various cities he goes to and contacts the local guitar studios and really, in advance of kind of him coming, he'll maybe set up a few lessons and it'll get people excited that way. And there's something that, every band has that they can use in kind of bringing a crowd. And all you have to do is really, like, I contacted high schools, but really what it is just contacting a community of any sort, any kind of community, any niche. And once you get a niche crowd, a community, an organization, a group behind your event, behind your show, then they'll promote it within their community, their group, and they'll get a crowd out to the show. So, after years of touring and being based out of Minneapolis, and I built up my local base in Minneapolis, where I was drawing 600-700 people to most of my local shows. I realized that I needed a kind of a new challenge, a new change. And so I decided to move out to LA, honestly, just for a new challenge and to meet new people and to co-write. Is a great writing community here. And so I moved out here about 3.5 years ago, and have been more so working the kind of the national scene here. Like you said, YouTube. I've been doing a little bit of YouTube, and I've been I didn't mention before, but I play a lot of colleges. So I do a lot of college touring and do a lot of like fly out, fly back, one-off college gigs. But I've used LA more so to kind of network here and see the opportunities that arise in LA. And I've kind of used, and that's, like you said, I started blogging, and it really wasn't my intention, but I'd always gotten a lot of questions from musicians on kind of how I ran my career and how I got songs placed on TV shows and how I booked a tour and how I promoted and on and on and on. And so instead, I didn't have enough time to respond to every musician that was contacting me. So that's why I started Ari's Take, and I just kind of put all of the most popular questions that I got asked and just kind of put them up in blog form. And now I just refer people to that, and it's kind of taken on a life of its own. And I'm happy to be able to kind of help musicians through that.
That's awesome. There's a lot in that. I just wanted to.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's fantastic. That's pretty much the full history there. That's great.
Right.
a couple of things just for some perspective, particularly for the Australian listeners that might not be familiar with who you are. If I'm not mistaken, Wisconsin, Minnesota, that's in the Pacific Northwest, is that right? Or Pacific
No,
Midwest. Is that Midwest?
It's in the Midwest. Yeah, it's just south of Canada. It's like dead smack in the center of the country.
So we're talking about universities that are the size of a small town, so 40,000+ people. So
exactly,
even though your career is, involves a lot of universities and still does, they're massive populations of, key music fans. So I just think that's important because it would have, when most Australian people are thinking about starting a music career, they're probably looking at, in terms of scale, at an entire city because, we don't have universities and the college culture like in Australia.
Sure.
So just to maybe dig into a really tough question, I mean, there's so much in that intro, I could just pretty much sit on that in the whole conversation, but there was a few things I wanted Ari on specifically to talk about.
Sure.
One is I've noticed you've been writing for a couple of maybe of the bigger music industry blogs at the moment, or blogs that have a lot of traffic, and I've been seeing those links coming from your social media back to those posts, and I have noticed that some of them are quite volatile, some of those communities, but also that there just seems to be a lingering mindset of people that are just waiting around to be chosen. And even after like 15 years, I mean, people talk about the old music model and the new model, which I'm not sure is completely as defined as the old model was, but
sure.
I mean, that's been dead for since 2002. I mean, Seth Godin wrote about that in The Purple Cow, so it was already dead then, and people are still clinging to that mindset of just waiting around to be chosen. Do you still find that is just really ingrained in people? And why is it still there? Because it's clear that it's just not how things are now. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, and what musicians are hoping for is, yes, to be chosen, to get signed or whatever. Well, what they're looking for is to be able to do nothing else but what they love, in that they want to just sit around and write songs all day and then go and play shows. And they're like, like our favorite musicians from the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, that's all they did. They just wrote music, they wrote music, and the labels and the management and the lawyers and the booking agents did all the work. And then they had, the glory of going and performing it and having hordes of fans. And that sounds awesome, and I'm sure it was. And it's like, it's the dream, and of course everyone would love that. Like, I would love that. Are you kidding me? Like, I didn't do the business because I love the music business. I did it because I had to. Like, and I think that's the biggest disconnect, is that if you don't if you're like completely unable to work the business side of your music career, you're not going to have a music career. And then you're going to have to find somebody that is just as passionate about your music as you are, and who you trust to manage all of that, which most likely you're not going to find, and definitely not going to find when you're starting out and have no fans and no following and nothing to show for yourself. So I a lot of musicians, they just they're reminiscing about what it was like, or what they thought it was like, when all they had to do was write a hit song, and then a label picked them up and threw millions of dollars at them, and they became superstars. Like, that sounds amazing. Of course, like, everyone would love that. But I think what most musicians don't understand is like that is a 1 in a million, and you're not going to be the 1 in a million. Like, that doesn't happen anymore. And when it does, it really doesn't happen anymore. The labels aren't going to sign a nobody, no matter how good they are, no matter how great their songs are. Like, yes, you have to be great. And I'm not going to belittle the importance of a great song or a great live show like that. That's the foundation of everything I talk about. Like, I don't even, if a musician comes to me and they suck, I'm like, all right, forget about the business, work on your craft. Like, you need to be great before you can concentrate on anything else. Like, get good. And then you can, then you have something to show for yourself, and then you'll start building a fan base. If you suck, there's not going to be a fan base. But I think the biggest thing is that, like, once you're great and you've worked on the music, and you really have a strong sense of craft and writing and performance, and you're experienced, no one is just going to discover you. That doesn't happen anymore. You have to build the following and the fan base. And then when you have something to show for yourself, that's when maybe some labels will come knocking or managers will come knocking. But you should never fully let go of, you should never fully hand off your business to anybody, because no one is going to care about your music career as much as you do. And the moment that you give up all of your control to someone is the moment that your career starts taking a serious downward turn.
Well said. I just thought that it was important to, get that out of the way.
Totally.
Because it's just something that, and I'm not sure what blog it was. I won't say what it was, even if I do remember what it is through the call, but I just couldn't believe the amount of vitriol that got sent your way about making the presumption that was seen as a presumption that artists should have to work really, really hard now. And it's not because it's ideal or it's what we all want.
Right.
It's just a reality. So,
yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of people who are they hate how quickly the I don't want to say the whole the music industry is moving, but technology is moving, and they're so afraid of streaming because people don't understand, they can't grasp it really, and because it's on such a smaller scale, they don't understand the power of what streaming can do. And I think there's just a lot of people out there who see that Spotify only pays, $0.006 dollars. That's like a half a cent, basically, just over a half a cent per stream. They're like, this is absurd. Like, no one can live off of that. I'm like, all right, yes, but Spotify just started. Like, give it time to grow. And also, no one ever just concentrated on one revenue stream for their music. Like, even the most successful musicians in the world in the heyday of the music industry, I just wrote about this on Digital Music News. Even the most successful musicians in the industry never relied on record sales because the label took all those sales. They relied on touring and merchandising and licensing and all the other sources. And so people who are screaming about, download, no one's paying for music anymore. It's like, listen, musicians never made their living off of people paying for music, even when they weren't paying for music. So just get over it and move on.
Well said. I've actually, when it comes to the streaming debate, just before I move on with some more of my questions, I've always described streaming as, when I was a kid growing up, the way that I would discover new bands was always from someone showing me a CD.
Yeah.
And I wasn't paying for every time that person was to show me a song, but my best mate came to me and said, hey, you've got to hear the new Pearl Jam record, or
right,
this new Offspring CD sucks, or whatever it was, because we're all massive Smash fans. And
right.
and that's how I see streaming now. It's just a way for an introduction to new content, because most people, if they truly, truly love something, I think they understand that at some point the artist needs to be remunerated if they're going to survive. So then hopefully they go to shows or buy merch or whatever. But to me, it's just, and people have maybe the wrong idea too behind what the actual business model of those streaming sites is.
Yeah.
They're not artist services companies. I think that people might have it a little bit confused as to what they are. But
right.
That's
and to Spotify's credit, they are working with Topspin to add merchandise options to the Spotify interface, where they never needed to do that. And they're working with Songkick to put up tour dates on when you listen to an artist on Spotify, you'll see their tour dates right there, which Spotify never needed to do. Like, this is amazing. And the fact that, people can listen to music for $10 a month, unlimited amounts, as much as they possibly want, is incredible. Like, I have a Spotify account. I love it. And, as just a music lover, I think it's incredible. And I love where the music, world is heading, that I can have all the music pretty much ever created at my fingertips. And I'm happy to put my music on Spotify, and I'm happy to gain many new fans because of that. And like you said, people who really love it, which is the people that any musician should be targeting anyways, will compensate you in a ticket or in a T-shirt or in your Kickstarter campaign or something. You will get money from those fans. It may not be as instant as a download, but you will, your true fans will pay you money at some point if you give them ways to compensate you.
So just to move on from that, and it actually parlays well into my next question. When it comes to streaming, obviously you need to use some kind of aggregation service to get on there. And I think this is a good example of what Ari does that I've never actually seen anyone else do online in the music marketing space. You do a lot of what the broader internet industry would call A/B testing, or comparisons between different companies. And I know that you did a really, really awesome breakdown of TuneCore and CD Baby.
Thank you.
Which was good for me because I used TuneCore for one of my band's digital aggregation, but I actually used CD Baby back in the day to start a website on HostBaby because I was a massive Derek Sivers fan. He's an amazing author. I just love the man. And I was just thinking it was interesting for me because you really did break down well what exactly is best and worst about both companies, which means that you actually had to put music on both services to do that, or at least test it. Can you tell us about why you do such vigorous testing and why you think it's important?
Yeah. I've done a few different comparisons. One of them was my CD Baby Pro versus TuneCore Publishing. So TuneCore launched their publishing services a couple years ago, and CD Baby just launched their publishing services, admin publishing services, I should say, about a year ago. And right when CD Baby's publishing service came out, publishing is one of the most elusive parts of the music industry. Most record execs, booking agents, musicians who spend their entire lives in the music industry never grasp what music publishing fully is. So I didn't expect, DIY musicians to really understand what TuneCore or CD Baby were honestly offering. And if you don't know what a service is offering, you shouldn't, or anyone is offering, you shouldn't sign away your rights or your money or commission or anything. So I've been fortunate enough to I shouldn't say fortunate enough. Well, shit, I put in the work, and I've studied music publishing throughout my entire career. And I went to school. I forgot to mention this at the beginning, but I spent 3 semesters at a music industry school and studied music business, and so that like started my appetite for kind of the business side of music. But I've kept up with publishing, and so I understand it more than most. And so I had the foundation, and so I really dug into both of these companies extensively. And I wanted to, but I'm also a musician, and I all my friends are musicians, so I know how musicians think and they talk. And so I communicated the really difficult publishing services that they were offering in a musician, speak, I suppose. And so that was the publishing comparison. And then also I did one of the other ones I did was for distribution services. So like when you say your band's music is on TuneCore, I'm assuming you mean through TuneCore distribution, like you get music onto iTunes, right? iTunes and Spotify and Google Play and all that stuff through TuneCore. But there's tons of companies that offer services, and it took me 50 some hours to really dig in and compare all of the intricate, nuanced services that each of these companies offer. But I thought it was really important for musicians to really understand what is best for their situation. And at the end of my entire comparison of these 7 different distribution companies, I came to my own conclusion for my own music, what is best. But what I realized was that there wasn't one service that was way above all the other ones in terms of what they did. But I did realize that, I pointed out where each service excelled and where each service fell short, and then musicians could make up their own minds for their own specific situation. So I have like a friend, basically, just to give it a quick example, I have a friend who actually you probably know of him. He's huge in Australia, Ron Pope, for instance. So Ron Pope is a very, very successful DIY musician. He has, I don't know, millions and millions and millions of plays on YouTube. He sold over 2 million downloads on iTunes. Incredibly successful DIY musician. TuneCore, basically a service that doesn't take a commission and just charges him a yearly fee, is smart business for him, because he's selling millions of downloads and streams and everything like that. He should keep 100% of the money if you possibly can, and maybe pay them $50 a year to just keep it up. Whereas like 98% of all the other DIY musicians aren't selling enough to justify paying a company $50 a year versus a 9% commission. So it's like those kinds of things. And but there are services that each of these companies offer that maybe are more attractive to other musicians. So, I mean, to getting back to your original point of why did I do this? I did it because these are things that, as a musician myself, I wanted to know. Like, I wanted to know, should I get on, CD Baby or TuneCore or Ditto or Mondo Tunes or, any of these companies? And I've been hearing about all of them, and I'm releasing my new album. Like, well, shit, who do I use? I've released 7 albums or something, 7 releases, and I've used various companies. Like you said, I have tested a few of them out, and I wanted to know, like, really, who's the best or who's best for me. And so I did all the research, but I, help other musicians. And that's like the whole point of Ari's Take and everything that I do when I post it is just to like, help musicians.
And I mean, I appreciate your posts. You're probably actually the only person whose blog posts in the whole music marketing scene I actually read now. So,
right on.
It's really for that reason, because I do a lot of consulting outside of the music industry. So I know a lot about just the general internet marketing vibe and what's hot in internet marketing in general. And sure. I see a lot of that stuff just get filtered down and maybe just turned into more music speak. And I just know I can just, from being in a band myself, I can just see that that's cool. It sounds great. But what's the answer to this question, and what if this happens? And what if my band doesn't care about that particular service that might cost us $14 a month? How do I sell that to my band as being something of value? And that's what I think your site brings. And I'll link up some of your best comparison posts.
Cool. Perfect.
The ones I love the most in the show notes for this episode. So
absolutely fantastic.
Just to move on from that, and I wish I had more time today with Ari to go into publishing, because it's something that, even though I've studied it and I've read several books about it, it still blows my mind a little bit. It can get very convoluted, and it's some heavy legal language and a lot of finance related to it as well, with splits and percentages and all that sort of stuff.
Totally.
How do you get that question a lot? And that's probably what I wanted to sit on maybe for the rest of this conversation. And I know my audience would throw things at my head if they could see me if I didn't ask you in particular, being someone that's actually managed to license a song. Is publishing and licensing something you think that maybe bands that are starting out get too fixated on because it seems like a magic bullet? I mean, it's an amazing thing, and I'm sure it did great things for your career, but that came for you through a lot of hard work and tracking people on Twitter to, get used to their language and making connections. Is it something you think that maybe is as important or more important than things like booking shows and writing songs and email lists and that sort of stuff? Where does it sit in priority for you?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think it goes along with kind of my overall philosophy in that you need multiple revenue streams to make a successful music career. No band or musician should rely on just one revenue source. Where does licensing fall in my total pie chart of income? Maybe 10%. So, and I've had some massive placements, but it's definitely not enough to live on. And I've gotten a lot more placements than a lot of people. But it's, it's taken a lot of time and effort and so no, bands should not look at licensing as a magic bullet. It's not. It can be. It's always nice receiving the checks in the mail, and I look at it as like, free money. I mean, and it's not free. I mean, granted, I put tens of thousands of dollars into the recording process and hundreds of hours into pursuing all of it, but you can't rely on it. But that's me. That being said, I have a friend, and I wrote about her in when I posted 10 musicians who make good livings in the music industry. She supports a family of 4 solely on licensing.
Wow.
But the way that she did it is she has spent the last 10 years building connections with music supervisors and licensing companies. And that's what she does is, she concentrates solely on licensing. She never tours. She has 2 kids. She rarely performs. She performs live occasionally, but the main focus is on licensing. But it didn't come after a month of putting in the work, or even a year, or 2 years, or 3 years. Like, that's what a lot of people don't realize, is that this was a 10-year process that she's worked towards. And yeah, you can make a shit ton of money in licensing if you get hooked up with the right licensing companies, with the right music supervisors. A lot of her placements, honestly, are even direct with directors of movies and TV shows and whatnot, that she just became friends with by being in LA and kind of growing as in the creative artist community here over years. And they were friends when the director was nothing, and the director made a movie, and the director put his friend's music in it, which was this girl, and the movie happened to explode, and that kind of thing. So it's like, licensing is awesome, and I still pursue it very actively. But like I said, it's probably 10% of my total music income, and it shouldn't be something that people spend all of their time doing. It should be part of it, but it's unrealistic to think that by putting in 3 months of work, you're going to be able to survive on licensing for your music career.
Well said. And just, mate, I wasn't trying to be negative about the idea of licensing. I personally think it's a great opportunity, and it's yeah, totally. It must have done amazing things for your general brand equity, because to be honest, I don't think I would know who you were to the point where I would have really went and seeked you out, because I already had several music marketing references in my own life that I was looking to. If it wasn't because you'd made your way onto their radars, maybe because you had that brand equity and that power and the push from being licensed at such a high level.
And that's a good point. It really is. It does help your resume also. I mean, so I've had some placements where they didn't pay anything up front, and I made all the money in the performance royalties in the back end. But it's nice to put into my bio. It's like, had songs featured on MTV and in the TV show One Tree Hill. It's like, those are like impressive accolades, and it's always good to have accolades for your bio and your press, for your press release and everything like that. So that can help.
Excellent. So we might just finish up the formal part of the interview today with that.
Sure.
That's excellent. Thanks for it's been a mountain of information today, and I think if we were just to give everyone maybe 2 takeaways to today, for me, one of them would be it's a long-term process, but it's just a lot of hard work. There's a book out there that there's an author, MJ DeMarco, and he makes reference to this thing called process over events. And people that are musicians, they tend to focus very much on the event at the end of things and not actually doing any of the work in between and get fixated on that. And I think just from today, from what you've told me, you had a very well thought out approach to how you wanted to tackle everything, but you weren't afraid to stuff things up and experiment and weigh up different options and check out different platforms before you actually dived in on things to save yourself time. So just to me, it's take your time, think about what you're doing, but be prepared to work hard. And also that nothing happens overnight. And I know that might sound like old advice, but I think it just helps people to get focused on the process of their career, not the big event at the end. So
totally.
Yeah. So do you just want to tell us what's next for you, Ari? Because I'm sure you've got loads and loads of cool stuff happening, as always.
Yeah, sure. I'm currently working on my record release. That's March 29th. I'm releasing my new album that I've been working on for the last 2 years worldwide. And I have a record release show in LA at the Hotel Cafe, one of my favorite venues to play. And so I'm just preparing for that. I literally put in a poster and flyer order today, and I've got the band together for it, and I just scheduled a listening party for the record release. It was like a listening party a week beforehand, because I'm ordering vinyl records, so I'm really excited for that. And so we're going to get 30, 40 people together and just listen to the record. The record release is kind of the next major thing I'm looking on my horizon. But also I'm I'm showcasing in about a month for the National NACA conference. NACA in America is basically it's the organization that most of the colleges, most of the universities here subscribe to. They go to a yearly conference to scout out talent for the year. And so a lot of my college shows will be booked from this showcase. Showcasing there in a month. It'll be in front of, I think, 6,000 people or so. The showcase is like literally held in an arena. So it should be pretty fun and cool, but I get 15 minutes to show them my stuff and hopefully book a lot of shows. And that was kind of the, like part of the college thing that I briefly mentioned before. And so I have that, and then the record release, and then who knows, just kind of, everything else that I'm working on these days, and that goes into it.
That sounds great. I've actually heard a little bit about that NACA thing.
Okay.
And I'd love to have you back maybe in the future to talk about that more, to let me know how that goes, and to
Sure.
talk about your CD release. That sounds really exciting. So when exactly is the date of all that stuff happening, Ari?
Yeah, the record release is March 29th. It is that's when it hits stores online and Spotify, and also that's the date of the record release show at the Hotel Cafe in LA. So and NACA is February 15th, I think, is the national 16th. One of those. It's like a long weekend is the conference in Boston.
Awesome. Well, best of luck from me personally, and from my listeners too. It all sounds pretty amazing, mate. And thanks for sharing such great advice today. I think that there's a lot of real concrete takeaways for people. So Ari's Take is a website, and aristake.com, and I think it's just at Ari's Take on Twitter. Is that where you most like to communicate with people on Twitter?
That is correct. And my music one, those are the Ari's Take ones, and then my music is just ariherstand.com, and then at Ari Herstand. If you want to hear what I'm eating for dinner, you can follow that one too.
Excellent. I'm not sure whether I'll do that, but I'm sure someone out there will. Awesome, mate. Well, thanks so much for your time today, and I hope you have a fantastic day, and good luck with all the stuff that you're doing.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
See ya.